All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is Scott Harvey. Scott is a former FBI trained hostage negotiator and public information officer. He's taught thousands of D.A.R.E classes, and now he's a business owner, a keynote speaker, a podcast host, and I love his podcast, and that's how we connected in the first place. He's a husband and a father of 2 daughters. We're so excited to have you here on the podcast, or the assembly today, Scott. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this.
Now, I give the short bio, but tell us a little bit about your involvement with schools. You know, here we are in this virtual school assembly. You've been in a lot of schools over the last 20, 30 years. So just tell us a little bit about how that started for you and what you've done in schools.
Yeah, so I started at the police department back in 1998 to save the world. You know, why would anybody else get into policing? It's not for the money. And I worked patrol for like 1.5 to 2 years, and I figured out that's a cleanup business, and cleanup is expensive and cleanup is messy. And I wanted to get into prevention. And so an opportunity came up to get trained to teach the D.A.R.E program. So I signed up for that opportunity at my police department, was selected, went to D.A.R.E officer training, and spent 18 years teaching 5th and 7th graders about responsible decision making. You know, D.A.R.E has evolved over the years to just include helping kids make responsible choices, which we as adults need. And so in that lane, I was working with schools all the time. My wife is a school teacher. I became the supervisor when I got promoted over school resource officers. So I had 5 police officers that I was responsible for, 1 in each of our 2 middle schools, 1 in each of our 2 high schools, and 1 at our alternative middle high schools. So when I wasn't teaching D.A.R.E, I was in those schools, and I was helping them. I was reading their case reports. I was helping them solve problems in their schools. And I was eating more than my fair share of school lunches, not for the wonderful taste, but for the nutritional value, because they are nutritious, and also they're $2. So the monetary value was huge as well. But over those lunch tables, conversations with kids, man, there's something about just sharing a meal with people. They say things to you, they drop their guard. And I started discovering there was a lot of issues 10 years ago-ish with bullying related stuff. And so I thought, if I'm going to be working with these kids, I need to really understand it. So I started researching it. And out of that research, a friend of mine who was responsible for a state training conference that I attended as a D.A.R.E officer, she said, "Hey, I've had somebody back out who was supposed to do a breakout session for one of our conferences. It's in like 2 weeks. Do you have anything you can talk about?" It's like, well, I've been researching bullying. I mean, I feel very confident talking about that. So did my first conference presentation around 2010. And the people that were in there were principals, school resource officers, D.A.R.E officers. They came up to me afterwards. They're like, "Hey, would you come and teach this to our students, teach this to our faculty?" And then the snowball just kept rolling over and picking up snow. And, you know, fast forward to today, been blessed to talk to hundreds of thousands of people, over 500 paid presentations. I have corporate talks that I do now, retired in 2018. And stepped into this full time. So I'm just finding new ways to serve now with the podcast and the other things that I do.
Cool. Well, and I love, so for you, you know, it started with drug prevention. You find this other huge problem in schools with bullying. And of course, in the last 10 years, we've had more and more issues with cyberbullying. And especially right now with COVID and doing more online education and hybrid education, we're seeing a lot of issues crop up with cyberbullying and just other technology related issues. So I guess the first question I want to ask you is, what have you seen as far as trends that kids are facing now that maybe they weren't facing 10, 20 years ago in regards to technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can tell you 2 years into the bullying presentation, social media kept cropping up because that's how students are connecting today. When you and I were growing up, it was at the mall or on the street corner, on the ball field. Today, they're connecting online. It's just a natural way they're connecting. So I thought I'd put together a presentation dealing with responsible use of technology. And around 2012, 13, I tried to market this to principals, and actually they said, this is not a school-based problem. So to prove them wrong, in the bullying assembly that I was there for, I would ask kids, how many of you have ever secretly come to school, excited about how the drama that has been unfolding online is going to play out in real life? And almost every hand comes up. Right. So yes, Mr. or Miss Principal, this didn't start at your school. but it will affect your school environment. So, those things are transferring over. What's in the virtual world will affect our schools. What's in our schools affects the virtual world, because there's no distinction for students today. It's just another way they exist. For you and I, we had to learn that way of existing.
Hmm.
So it's a different way. And I think one of the biggest issues I see with kids, and from a parenting standpoint, is kids have 24/7 access to their technology, which the brain research is very, very clear. And that sets them up for anxiety, for stress, for solving adult-sized problems just with little kids at 2 a.m. on their devices trying to help each other out. They're well-intentioned, but they're just not getting the sleep they need. And then allowing access to social media prior to the terms of use recommended age. And almost all of them say 13. I tell people all the time, I set rules in this world for 2 girls. They're 20 and almost 16 now. But those are the only people I set rules for. You decide what's best for your kids. But I can tell you, allowing kids access to things too soon is going to ratchet up some of the anxiety. And some of social media is a great thing. I'm a huge fan, but it is a drama increaser. It's not a drama decreaser. And so if you have a high drama kid, which they're all different, thankfully, that just know it's really going to kind of ratchet them up. Even low drama kids, it just kind of ratchets them up. And as they start with their social media stuff, that can potentially follow them for the rest of their life. So the students that are listening now, you need to realize, while I have a business and a brand and all of that stuff, I've been very intentional about that. You're starting that at your first use online. You're developing a brand. You can find things about people online. Even with all your privacy settings locked down, there is no such thing as a private online conversation. It's potentially shareable. All of that stuff is your personal brand. Now, there is going to be some grace for an 11-year-old that does something stupid online when they're 20 trying to get a job. I get that. But once again, when I got into police work, I realized cleanup was very messy and very expensive. Prevention is easier. So if you can build your online presence in a responsible way early, you don't have to do the cleanup, and you don't have the damage that comes from poor use.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about, that the damage is certainly there, and there is some grace and there is some forgiveness, when you're really young. But even then, we see in this cancel culture that we're in right now that people will have made a tweet 10 years ago or some,
Yes.
if Twitter was around 10 years ago, whatever, a long time ago.
Yes.
And it's haunting them now. People are getting fired today for something that they posted a decade ago. And we've seen that in college football. We've seen that in Hollywood, and we're going to continue to see that. So obviously it is important to be smart about those kinds of things. Now, when we talk about social media, you mentioned, there's a reason that there's those terms of service that you shouldn't have a social media account before a certain age. Why are some of the reasons that you think that is the case? What's some of the damage that can come from being on social media too early?
So yeah, I will say, the first 13 years of our lives are potentially some of the most awkward. When you throw like 10 to 15 in there, that's a time in life where not a whole lot makes sense. And for the students that are listening, if I'm speaking to you right now, I was speaking to me at that age. It's a time in life where things don't make sense. You're trying to figure out who you are. And just like we don't drive until we're 16, because you have to be developmentally ready, you have to be cognitively ready. Even if you can drive at 12, you're not going to get a license till you're 16, 15 in some states. So there are some things that we just kind of have to say, I'm just not ready for that yet. I loved that as a parent, because I would just tell my kids, the rules say 13, and we kind of follow rules at the Harvey house. And that was a cop out almost for me as a parent to say, you're not 13 yet. But at the same time, we're going to look at when you're actually physiologically and mentally ready, even if it's not at 13.
Right.
So I think, because it potentially creates more drama, because students are going to share things at 11 that they wouldn't share at 14, like their address, like, their car with the license plate on it, things that could be security issues that they realize later. And I've seen, because my kids are 4.5 years apart, 5 years apart in school, the oldest one told the youngest one, if you share some of this dumb stuff at 13, when you're my age at 18, you're going to want to delete that stuff anyways, because it's embarrassing. And
Right.
so, to your point of people going back with the cancel culture and finding tweets from 10, 12 years ago, finding photos from 30 years ago, I hope we get to a point where we realize I was different 20 years ago than I am today. I'm a
Right.
better version of me now than I am today. I know you well enough to know you would say the same thing. You're at a healthier place. You're at a more fulfilled place than you were 20 years ago. We need to give people the grace to change. We need to maybe not document their lives as closely during those formative years, because we all are awkward and we all do silly things that we don't necessarily want a permanent record of.
Right. That's great. Now let's talk to those kids who are in social media, our high school audience, and
Hmm.
those who maybe have been there for a while now. One of the big dangers, of course, in being heavily involved in social media is a lot of things happen that aren't real, right? So we
Right.
have mismatched perceptions of reality, and of course what that invites in is cyberbullying, as you mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
So if you're a kid that has social media and you want to be active, I mean, there's a lot of good things you can do with social
Hmm.
media as far as networking and building a brand. We'll talk more about that later. But also there's this potential for bullying, as a bully or being bullied yourself. So
Right.
what would be your advice to these kids who are on social media so that they can avoid some of those situations where they're being bullied or being more vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I tell parents in schools all the time, I'm not the guy that thinks we need to get rid of it all. I'm actually a huge fan of responsible use of social media. And there are
Mhm.
some high school, late middle school kids doing some really amazing work with social media. They're helping people, they're spotlighting the positive, they're doing that stuff. So we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but there are definitely people who use social media to hurt other people. And one of the problems I see, especially with high school students, is the belief that certain platforms are more secure than others. Right now, a lot of high schoolers are wanting to use Snapchat because they feel safe using Snapchat because it deletes itself and this kind of stuff. But I tell kids it really doesn't, because understanding the magic behind the technology is where safe use can come from. When I send you a snap, it doesn't go from my phone to yours. It goes from my phone to a server where a copy is made and a copy is sent to your device. So even if we both delete, there's still a copy on a server, which is someone else's computer, that neither one of us has access to. And even if I delete all the snaps that come to my phone, I allow them to delete, I can plug my phone into our state police crime computer, and it'll recover almost every snap I've ever sent or received, including the deleted ones, because they're not deleted. They're still on my device. I just can't see them anymore.
Right.
And so creating a permanent record through this platform is what kids, when they send snaps, when they send DMs or whatever, realize that this is a permanent thing. It's not temporary. And students say, well, I get notified if somebody screenshots my snap. Not if I open it up through a third-party app that blocks all notifications. And
Right.
that technology is there. And
Yeah.
so there is no such thing as a private online conversation, but I have online conversations every day. I just see myself talking into a microphone in those conversations, and it changes the way I do those conversations.
Yeah, that's really smart. If you and this applies to so many things in life. If you think your mom's listening or watching, you're going to do it differently,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
fantastic. Well, so before you mentioned a little bit how you're in favor of certain technologies and how there are opportunities. Obviously, for kids that are using social media and other technology right now to get ahead in
Mhm.
life, this can
Mhm.
serve them really well for the long term. So let's talk about that for a while. What are some technologies that students could be on and using right now to get ahead
Yes.
in life that will really give them some advantages down the road?
Yes, when I speak in high schools, I really push in. We talk about different social media platforms, some of the more popular ones. And I push in with high schoolers on LinkedIn, because they're not on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is social media for old people, right?
Right.
It's for guys like us, but it's also for people trying to get a job. And I tell high schoolers, most of you can code a website better than me. All of you can Photoshop better than me. I see that on your Instagram accounts. All of you can video edit better than me. And those are skills that a guy like me will pay you for. And the beauty of that is you can do that at 2 in the morning from your dorm room on the other side of the country. And when the product is complete, you send it to me and I send you money. And so they have a platform to pay their way through college using things they just take for granted, because photo editing, video work, they just have the ability to do it because they grew up doing it. And that's a monetizable skill. Social media marketing, knowing what's hot, knowing what's trending, knowing what students like is a marketable skill. YouTube is a marketable skill. I know students who are on YouTube showing parents how to use technology, and they're monetizing that platform through ad clicks and things like that. And it's a job. So there are things today that students can be doing that are marketable skills, but the curse of knowledge tells them, this is just what I know. Everybody knows this. Nobody's going to pay me for this. And my point is, maybe everybody your age, but they don't have any money anyways. Your market is the old people who don't know what you know and have the money to pay you for what you know. But I also tell high school students, but the thing is, before I hire you on LinkedIn, I'm going to check your other social media profiles. Because if your Twitter account shows you getting drunk all the time, I'm just not hiring you, because my brand is important to me. And I'm not going to let somebody who doesn't take their brand seriously work for my brand. So it's a whole package thing. And colleges, universities, and employers check social media these days before they admit you, because they're checking your brand and see if it jives well with their brand.
So we've talked about really three things here: skills, networking, and brand. With skills, obviously, if you can develop skills, whether it be in social media or developing technology-related skills like Photoshop, YouTube, stuff like that, that's going to serve you well in life. With
Yes.
networking, I love what you said about LinkedIn, and I'll admit, I don't know if I should. A year ago, I had 300 connections on LinkedIn. I wasn't using it, and shame on me. Now I have 10,000 connections on LinkedIn. And because of that, I've talked to a dozen Olympians and 50 or 60 people in Hollywood. And I'm making connections every day with people who want to work with me or I want to work with. And so, in fact, I think we did some connecting on LinkedIn.
We did.
And so, that networking piece is so important. And I know that it works even in high school, because I had a high schooler that connected with me. We were both preparing for our TED Talks. And we started being involved in some of the same groups. And she has had so many opportunities because of her connections in LinkedIn. I've kind of followed what she's doing. She has an amazing brand, and she is connecting with CEOs and business owners and getting basically all these free internships where she's learning these skills that most people don't get till their 30s and 40s. She's doing it in high school. So
yes. And colleges have LinkedIn pages. And if you're looking at colleges, that's why I push in on high school students here. And I also know from working with thousands of students don't like the drama that is social media. They just don't like it. And LinkedIn doesn't have that.
Right.
So it is kind of a drama-free area. My 15-year-old and I talked maybe a year ago. She was 14, and probably the most honest conversation we ever had. She was wanting an increase to her screen time because we control that through her phone. And I was talking about why the research doesn't support this and that kind of stuff. And she said, "Dad, I wish none of this social media existed." And this is through tears. This is real heart stuff from her. She goes, "I wish it all was gone." She goes, "But because it's not, I feel an obligation to connect with my friends and communicate the way everyone else is communicating." And I thought that's such a mature attitude of saying, I know this is possibly detrimental to me, but I also know not being with all of my friends and in the conversations they're in on these platforms would also be damaging to me. So it's a weighing of what kind of damage we want to endure. And I think LinkedIn is thankfully fairly drama-free, fairly politics-free. It's probably not COVID-free because nothing is COVID-free right now. Right. But it's a place to maybe escape some of that drama for high school students.
Yeah, good point. To wrap up here, we talked a little bit around this earlier, but as far as branding, I don't think having a brand or being part of a brand is something that young kids think about or even think is a thing. Like, do you have an online brand as a 15-year-old, for example? So let's wrap by just talking about that really quickly. What does it mean to have a brand as a 15-year-old, and why does that matter?
A brand is who people see you as. It's kind of your online presence. Like when people see you in school, are you kind of the athlete? Are you the person who will talk to anybody? Are you the funny kid? And we're all different, thankfully. I'm a huge fan of diversity and differences amongst any population. And your online brand is similar. What is it you're good at? What is it you like? What are the things you're into? If it's one direction, fine. You're into one direction, and that actually puts you in touch with other people who are into that same thing you're in. And it shows your skills, and it shows if I needed help with uh, a one direction question, I know the students that are my daughter's friends that I could go and ask that question to. So you become a resource. And that's a silly example, but if I also know you're a gymnast or you're a photo editor and I'm having an issue with that, I'm going to ask you that question because I know you'll answer it for me because you know more about it than I do. So that's kind of what branding is. It's kind of your online personality. And from a parenting standpoint, I recommend parents when a child is born, they buy firstandlastname.com domain for that child.
Yeah.
It's like $2 to $3 a year to own a domain. It's next to nothing. And you just own it until they're able to have it. And then they can start with their name because Scott Harvey is a winemaker in California. And so I can't get anything really with Scott Harvey on it. So it's difficult for me. But the more unique your name is, the easier it is. But if parents purchase that like they purchased life insurance, they would just own the domain, the .com, because there are a lot of different extensions you can use now. .com is the go-to one. It's the most trusted one.
Yeah.
So
cool. Well, thank you for your time today, Scott, and for sharing all this about, not just how to be safe with technology, but how to use it to our benefit. I think this has been a fantastic episode. If kids want to learn more, actually, no, we have to talk about your Youth Tech U. So for parents and teachers, this is especially for you watching, but this relates to kids as well. So you have this incredible resource now for parents and teachers who are worried about technology and what their kids are doing online. So you've created this Youth Tech U. Tell us a little bit about what it is and where they can get it, where they can find it, stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Youth Tech U, youthtechu.com is the URL. Youth Tech U is just a platform. It's a online course for parents and educators to familiarize them with the issues, the social issues that present students online, whether it's social media, cyberbullying, sexting. We talk about legal issues with sexting and that kind of stuff because I quote federal law. I have a law enforcement background. I dealt with this as a police officer. So better information to me leads to better choices. And the number one thing I heard from parents all across the country when I speak to them is they say, I just don't know anything about this. Well, we're all ignorant about something. That's not a bad thing. But if I'm ignorant about something that affects my kids, it's really my obligation to learn about that. And Youth Tech U is just to familiarize parents and teachers so that they can have informed conversations with their kids and they can help kids install the guardrails on the information superhighway. Because, from a driving standpoint, guardrails are designed to be in the places that is the most danger if we leave the road. And the guardrail will hurt our car, but it'll bounce us back into the safe area. And when parents know enough about technology, they can say, this is something I see as dangerous. And so I'm going to put in a guardrail right here for you while you're learning the online world to bounce you back into the safe area of the road. It's not like I'm going to take the keys from you, but I'm going to know enough to teach you how to responsibly use this and how to set parameters, because we set rules for things that we love, that are important to us. And so rules to kids feel oppressive until they're older and they realize rules actually communicate love.
Yeah. Cool. So if a parent wants to, or a teacher or a school district wants to get this Youth Tech U, you just go youthtechu.com. Is that the right address?
Yeah, youthtechu.com. And for parents, especially if they enter the code VSA for virtual school assembly for you, if they'll enter the code VSA, they'll save 25% off the basic plan. If you are a school, I do offer bulk licenses at a huge discount to schools because right now, especially, we can't bring parents in for assemblies. We're not allowed. We can't socially distance them. So We also know from a school standpoint, we can plan an amazing parent program and half a dozen parents show up. And those are the parents we don't really need to be there because their kids are killing it anyways and they attend all their events. So this is a way to provide content to parents in a way. These videos are 5 to 20 minutes each. There's 13 videos on Youth Tech U. It's about 3 hours of content total. But I can watch a 20-minute video while I'm waiting for my daughter to come out of volleyball practice. And then when she gets in the car, I turn the video off and go back home, and I can work my way through this course at my leisure. And if the school provides that for me, that just builds my loyalty and my community to that school.
Right. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we link all that in the description on this video. Scott, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much.